Talking of Bayern,
They were stealing the show. So the German national team, after months disappearance after the World Cup, wanted to create, as I said, some momentum, starting the international season with their or the not starting the in a way starting the international year with this home game against Peru. And what happened in Munich? So all cameras, all reporters, all commentators, everything looking to Munich. And have you been surprised what happened?
I was surprised. I got a call on Thursday. I was playing football myself for the first time in ages. And I was on the way to the game and I get a call and it says, yeah, it's imminent. Tuchel is coming and Nagelsmann is going. And I thought, okay, wow. Made a phone call, was told, yeah, they're talking about it, but it's not for sure yet. It might take some time, blah, blah. By the time I finished the game, it was like, okay, all done. Tuchel in, Nagelsmann out. It was a surprise because the timing was a surprise to me. I thought, are they really going to do it now with those key games coming up? But of course, Bayern did it precisely because of those games coming up. I realized that they said we cannot afford to have this inconsistency and this lack of stability and dominance, all the things we've talked about now for a long time, Christoph. If these things happen in the next 3 games or next 5 or 6, if you include the second leg of the Manchester City Champions League quarterfinal, then the season's over. So we have to pull the trigger now. I was speaking to some colleagues from The Athletic earlier today, and they said, well, we said it's basically the principle of Minority Report, the Philip K. Dick novel that was made into a film, where you see Bayern feel like they have to punish the crime before it happens. So they fire managers before they fail, not after. And this is a story that's been now repeating itself since really the days of Ancelotti, Kovac. It's a Magath, even if you want to go back further, it's always the same. So you're successful, but the moment that you go into the next season and Bayern feel this season will not be successful, they fire you to keep their chances of success. At least that's how they feel, keep it high. So a surprise about the timing, absolutely. But we talked about the doubts that persisted about Julian Nagelsmann and his fit for the team and the performances that Bayern had and the up and down. And maybe, Christoph, maybe it's a case of the inconsistency that a lot of young players have. Maybe that also applies to managers. Maybe they're also a little bit inconsistent, but a team like Bayern needs the stability.
Joshua Kimmich and also Leon Goretzka have been praising Julian Nagelsmann after he was sacked, and they sounded absolutely. It was not like just lip service. It sounded as if they meant it, and I think he is a very, very good, very, very good manager, and we have seen it. But I think you are right that he was probably a bit immature for being a Bayern coach at that age, or with this experience that he was having, or was having to learn about how much you're standing in the spotlight if you're and that's far bigger than what you have not only at Hoffenheim, and not to mention the village team from Hoffenheim, but also in Leipzig, and we haven't been into the dressing room, and maybe we should enter a second phrase, because it's very often said when coaches have to leave at Bayern, that they die Kabine verloren haben. And I think there is also a literal translation and a similar meaning, what you have in English. You can explain it. And it sounded a bit like as if he had lost some of his players in the process of the last 1.5 years. What's your impression?
Yeah, I don't think he ever lost the whole dressing room.
Yeah.
And that would be Kabine verlieren. But I don't think the whole dressing room ever followed him either. So this was not a Niko Kovac situation or an Ancelotti situation where they really couldn't handle him anymore and they were so fed up and Bayern needed to do something. There were players that generally liked him. There were players that thought he was a great tactician. But there were also players who were disappointed in him. Perhaps that's inevitable at a club like Bayern Munich and not the main reason. I think the bigger problem is the performances. And the Bayern board, when they went public with the explanation, they said, these were up and downs. We didn't have the consistency. There's not enough points this season. And they then talked about his relationship to the team as not being 100% right and so on. But I think the main reason was more fundamental, that in their view, he didn't get the most out of this team. And I think it's hard to disagree with that analysis, having seen all those poor performances and pretty average results. And even in the Champions League, I think Bayern looked at those games quite closely and saw that actually Bayern could have lost at least a few of those games. Got a little bit lucky, certainly against Barcelona and Inter. PSG are not that great a side that we shouldn't overestimate how difficult it was to beat them, etc. So in the end, they just felt he wasn't doing his job properly, really. And everything else was kind of a side issue. Yeah.
You were suggesting in what you were writing for The Athletic that it was also had to do with a kind of they now had the opportunity to sign Thomas Tuchel, who just moved to Munich by accident or by whatever, and and that they were also a bit afraid that something could happen again. What already happened was it in 2017? 18? Yes, when they wanted to sign him, and Uli Hoeneß wanted to keep Jupp Heynckes, and in the end, Jupp Heynckes retired, and Thomas Tuchel was gone to Paris and couldn't be signed by Bayern. Was there a similarity to this situation? Maybe with Tottenham approaching him, or what's the story there?
I think there was a similarity, but there was also a different case. It was similar in the sense that they had talked to Tuchel in 2018 when they looked for somebody to succeed Heynckes. And by the time they had internally agreed to really go for him and stop trying to persuade the poor Jupp to continue, Tuchel had already signed for PSG. So they wanted to avoid that scenario at all times. And they understood from what was happening that he had other offer and wouldn't just hang around forever. But I think it's different in the sense that in 2018, Jupp was leaving, and they knew that. Here, I think Nagelsmann would still be in the job if Tuchel hadn't been available. I think if Bayern don't feel that Tuchel is now a chance for us to really play a lot better, to have more success with his team, to have more of a tactical identity, more structure, if he's not available now, I think they would have tried to find a way to finish at least the season with Nagelsmann. Mm-hmm. So Tuchel's availability gave them the confidence to make that move now. And so Hasan Salihamidzic said the same. He said on Sunday in Doppelpass, he said, well, I couldn't call Julian before I had the how do we say?
Or I reached an agreement.
Yeah. I couldn't call Julian and tell him that he's leaving before I had Tuchel's acceptance, before I had Tuchel an agreement with Tuchel. And that shows you that without the agreement of Tuchel, that phone call probably doesn't happen, because I don't see Bayern putting some interim coach or Topmöller, the assistant coach, in the job for this. So Tuchel made it happen. And in that respect, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised, because the moment Tuchel was available earlier this season, it was clear that Tuchel was sort of the phantom menace in the background that would put more pressure on Nagelsmann. Bayern was so keen on him to sign him after Hansi Flick left, because he was quite obviously the best available candidate if you want to have a German-speaking manager. There's Klopp, there's Tuchel, and then there's Nagelsmann. Klopp and Tuchel weren't available, so they went really hard on Nagelsmann. Now Tuchel was available, and in Bayern's mind, it's considered an upgrade.
And I think it is. And I think there have been a lot of commentaries about the situation, and a lot of criticism for Bayern, and because it was said, for example, that Hasan Salihamidzic, so Julian Nagelsmann, is his coach because he wanted him. But as you said, when you look back, when he was signed, I think it was almost a kind of no-brainer to sign him, because I wouldn't have, as long as, and Bayern always wants to have a German-speaking coach. They only did broke the rules only for Pep, and
Carlo
Ancelotti. Trapattoni, he spoke proper German. No, but in general, they want to have a German-speaking coach, and as you said, it's so it was almost a no-brainer to sign Julian Nagelsmann, and honestly, he wasn't a complete failure, and not a failure in a sense that, as you said, you were thinking about, no, we have to sack him straight away and put some. Like they did with Niko Kovac, for example, where Hansi Flick, he was not the premium choice, and so he was a stand-in coach that miraculously developed into one of the biggest success stories in the history of the club. But the situation is not similar here, and I think in a way Tuchel is an upgrade, because now Tuchel has the experience of working with a very complicated team, and in a very complicated club in Paris, working with Chelsea in the Premier League, having been to the Champions League final twice, winning it. So again, it's a bit of a no-brainer to sign him here. And also, I found it very reasonable to sign him now, because, as you said, now it's crunch time. And if you have the feeling that the coach you're having is a bit shaky, also sign the one where you have the feeling that he will steer the wheel in towards the right direction. So in a way, it's the longer I've been thinking about it, it was so, yeah, yes, of course. You've got to do it. Or is that too simply?
No, it's yes, of course, if you think you've been following Bayern long enough to understand their mindset. But from the outside looking in, you think this club is crazy. You know, they have a young coach who's just won the title last year. He's in the Champions League quarterfinals. They've won every single game. Yes, they're 3 points, 2 points behind Dortmund. But so what? I mean, come on, relax. But Bayern don't do relaxing, right. And they don't do finishing second. I mean, other clubs might say, okay, we've won it now 10 years in a row. Is it the worst thing in the world to become second in the Bundesliga? Is it really gonna change anything. Bayern just find it intolerable. Just the idea of not winning the league, they have sleepless nights.
And you can turn the argument round. So if they would have said, we have a long-term plan with Julian, and now it's a bit rocky path and so on, and now and maybe in the end we become second, but we think in 5 years we're still working with him and have been very successful, blah, blah, blah. If they would have become second or went out, I mean, that's still not very unlikely, going out in the Champions League against Manchester City. Everybody would have said, you idiots, why didn't you sign Tuchel when he was available, and now he's at Tottenham or wherever, or Real Madrid has approached him, and so again, yeah, it's Bayern is not a romantic club. It's a success machine. They have to win things. End of the story. It's not with like Borussia Dortmund with Edin Terzic, the guy who has been in the away end of the Olympia Stadium to support his team, who comes from Dortmund, has been there as a kid to support the team, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not Bayern. I mean, yeah, that's... So when I was reading all this and listening to the press conference, I was thinking, in their own logic, and not in my romantic football perception, but in their own logic, yeah, go for it. It's totally okay.